Good afternoon. My name's Sean McEwen and I'm the publisher of Inside Aging. I'd like to welcome you all here today to our Future of Aging webinar, where we'll be discussing future technology, building design, and importantly, the assumptions that people might have about their future of aging and aged care. So it'll be a very interesting session. We've got most of our panelists here. We're just waiting on one more, but we can start, and Barry from Signature Care can join when he's available. But to introduce the speakers, we've got Julie Ockerby. Julie's on screen there. Julie's the founder and creative director of Melly Studio, a brand and design agency in Sydney. So welcome, Julie. We've got Roy Corrin. Roy is joining us from Israel. In fact, this is the first time we've had an overseas guest. Roy runs a marketing consultancy and age tech information service, and he's also very much involved in the startup scene in Israel. And we've got Dr. Liam Mayo. Liam is the Chief Executive Officer of Comlink, who provide independent living home care services here in Australia. So I might just give each of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves a little bit more fully, just about what they do and how they do it. But just a reminder to everybody that this is a live session, so you can ask questions at any time in the question box at the bottom of your screen. And a number of questions have been put forward already. So just type those in and we'll get to those where we can. But Julie, maybe if you can start, just tell us a bit about what you're doing. And you're very much at the coalface when it comes to aged care design.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I have been doing interior design. Melly Studio is an interior architect design firm based here in Sydney. I started my career off as a registered nurse a few decades ago. I actually kind of remember, it just means I'm getting old, but it's quite depressing when you do the maths. It's probably a good 26 years ago when I last nursed. So I nursed in intensive care and did a stint in emergency nursing and the paramedics for a while, but did very much enjoy my time as an RN, but then transitioned and studied a little bit more over to boutique hotels and spent some time in Europe marketing what we called little gems back then, and now it's boutique hotels are just sort of part of the norm. And then studied a little bit more and went into interior design. And so it sort of makes sense that our niche is actually designing in the aged care and seniors living space. It did come with an impetus of a personal story when my father was in his last few months and trying to find a home for him a good 20 years ago as well, and saw how the industry hadn't really progressed that much at that time, and just really wanted to be part of the pack that leads the innovation and design side of things to bring it up to when we get there, we'll be pretty happy with where we land. So that's what I do.
And Roy, your story there in Israel.
Hi there, shalom everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Sean, and the other panelists for having me. So I'm in the aging and longevity business for the last decade. I run a consultancy agency here in Israel. I worked with private companies and private businesses, and also government offices and public institutions, and of course Israeli entrepreneurs that wish to promote their innovation solution in the global aging markets. I also volunteering in a very large community here in Israel under the name Aging IL community, which combines a lot of professionals and also executives from all kinds of sectors, all concerning about aging well here in Israel. And for the last 3 years, I manage an online group under the name Aging Tech Israel Group, which operates both on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And I'm enjoying, the really boost in all the technology and innovation that coming from here and from Israel.
Right. And Liam, just a background to yourself.
Oh, hi, Sean, and everyone online today. It's a real pleasure to be here. Comlink Australia is a large not-for-profit organisation. We're based on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, but we service over 12 aged care planning regions across Australia. And our major focus is keeping people living well, healthy at home longer and in their communities. And we provide services to keep people connected to those communities, whether that be transport, cleaning services, or light domestic duties. Social inclusion is a big part of the work we do. And our major focus is to make sure that communities across Australia see our ageing population as an asset rather than a deficit. And we try really hard to think about ways that we can talk and behave differently to change the future for ageing for people across Australia. Personally, myself, I'm a social theorist. My PhD is in sociology, and in particular in the field of futures studies. I like to think really deeply about the ways in which culture and society manifest the future, or concepts of the future, and how we can think about that and change the way that we talk about ageing in our communities. My research in particular is in the area of how people and spaces reflect the future, and how we can think differently about spaces and people and change the future if we do that together. So tech's obviously a big part of that, but I think most importantly, the way that people behave in those spaces is really important. And that's part of the work we're doing here at Comlink Australia is connecting people to those places and making sure that that connection is strong and has a future focus, so we can all age together well in our communities.
Great, thanks. And Barry, great to have you on board. Barry's the General Manager of Innovation and Quality at Signature Care. Just a little bit of a background to yourself, Barry, if you could just share that with us.
Yeah, sure. Started off my career in the Navy, started off with, did 10 years there. And then that was probably about 30 years ago. I finished there and been in aged care ever since. Started off as a personal care worker and worked my way up through an EN and then RN, up into like the senior management. I've had a very keen eye on innovation the whole way through, in trying to make the life of the carers and the nurses easier using technology, as far as the documentation and compliance burden that we feel, particularly now, and which translates into better outcomes for residents. So that's probably where I'm going. But I'm working with a company at the moment who's very, very innovative. They've given me a lot of latitude to sort of experiment with different ways of documentation and everything, and basically gave me a bit of a blank canvas. So it's been fantastic.
Great, thanks, Barry. So what I might do to start off, what do you think, and this is going to be very interesting because you'll all have, I'd imagine, a different point of view. What do you think people today have as an assumption of what the future of aged care and aging is? So if somebody's walking around today at the age of 60, 50, what do they think will exist for them to give them a standard of living that they would be happy with? Maybe Julie, you're designing the buildings of tomorrow. What do they look like?
I think the market, if you're saying like the 65-year-old-ish who are thinking about it because it's just part of how life evolves, I think they're a lot more educated now. They want to know what's out there. They want to know about what technology is in place. So say 10 years ago when we had this discussion, we were talking about the baby boomers, like let's design towards the baby boomers. And the reality is the baby boomers are there, like they are already there. They're looking for independent living homes. They're probably still have mum and dad still around, so they're very aware of that aged care market, but they are certainly very well versed in the industry. They're looking for lifestyle. They're looking for extra services. They're a lot more pickier than say the previous generation, because they can be, but they have definitely arrived. So even up to a few years ago, when we're still talking about baby boomers are coming along, need to design for the baby boomers, they're here. They're here. And just on a few site tours yesterday at a few homes that we didn't design, you could tell that the next, this immediate generation that we've been waiting to come along, they've actually arrived onto that scene. So the design process and bringing technology into it is so much more, what's the word? We need to think so much harder to how we should design things. Like, it's much more of it is purpose driven, rather than we should do it because it's what we think is right. We need to do it because it is the right thing, and it needs to have a purpose to it. And I think that how we design, and other designers and other architects, the way of thinking has shifted quite a bit, because we've had to shift to meet the market as well.
Right. And Roy, you're in Israel there. What are the assumptions or expectations that people have there?
Well, I think the most interesting insight is that they have no benchmarking. The 60s, the above 60 and above 70 population have no benchmark. They do not wish to age as their parents or their grandparents. Okay, it's a total different set of mind. Especially when you look at the Israeli history, you can see that the older generation that are now on their 90s or the late 80s, they are what we call the survival generation. Okay, they experience so much hardness and so many wars. This is like a survival mode for them for so many years. But the next generation, the baby boomers, the Israeli baby boomers, have less in this survival mood, and also the next in line, which are the above 60 or the above 55. So they think so much differently from their parents and their grandparents. Also, we have so much progress in the government and institutional and public offering for senior population, because we now have in Israel more awareness to the quality of aging, not just providing services, but also for quality of life. This means that it's not just the what the public expect, but also what the authorities or the private sector are providing. So there are more solutions either from government or municipalities or public authorities, and also private solutions that you couldn't find them 5 or even 10 years ago. So I think it's a total, I tell a lot of people that when I was a kid back in the late 70s or early 80s, people smoke cigarettes in the movie theaters, and you put sun lotions in the beaches, okay? And the nutrition was so different than today. So the public awareness of all ages, and especially for seniors or older adults, to keeping their health and exercise and keep their nutrition and other physical or cognitive situation more in place. So this is a total different view.
Okay, thanks. And Liam, you have an interesting perspective, because you're very much supporting people to maintain a lifestyle at home. What's your view?
Yeah, and I think my view is probably an extension of both what Julie and Roy said, and I think it's quite simply summarised by change. We're undergoing significant change at the moment, and I think in Australia, everyone's been talking about this once in a generational change that we're going through at the moment as a sector holistically, but every demographic trend in every country in the world is around aging populations, right? And so what does that mean for the way that societies, globally and nationally, and then at the community level, are built and maintained and held? And I think for us in Australia, we look at it as sector. So we've gone through a period where we didn't really necessarily speak about aging as a sector in and of itself, and then we started to talk about that, and then you saw systems that came in place to support that sector, like superannuation, for example. So we started to think differently about what it meant to support people to retire, or how they would be enabled to retire now, or retire, you know, when they came of age. Now we're talking about, well, actually retirement is further on the horizon, and retirement looks very different to what it used to look like. There might be semi-retired or mixed models of retirement, or I'm retired but I want to go back and volunteer, and so that changes the way that our systems are talking about what it means to retire, and also as a sector, the way that we're engaging with that part of the population as well. And I think, you know, we've spent a long period talking about what does our budget look like, or how do we economically invest in this demographic, or these services to this demographic. And that's shifting as well, as people, like Julie said, start to come online, and that aging population, baby boomers' expectation is that actually I still have something to give to the economy, and it's not just about me being supported, but I have a value and I am an asset to the community and to the culture, and I have a voice in what's happening as well. And that changes the narrative holistically for all of us, and particularly for those of us working in the sector. You know, our workforce is changing too. So we don't talk about caring for our clients. We talk about walking the journey of aging with our clients. You know, we are enabling people and enriching their lives as they age at home and in their communities. And that's a very different mindset to happen. And that's happening very quickly. So the change is happening faster than anyone would have anticipated. But I think it's looking bright. You know, I think that's a really positive change. And I think as all of us age, if we can get the next decade right, particularly here in Australia, I think aging will become something that we look forward to, and something that we should embrace culturally. But there are some things that we need to do, I think, as a culture to get that right. But change is the way that I would, you know, and transformative change, I think, is what's happening for us at the moment.
And Barry, you operate a number of aged care facilities throughout Australia, but you're also in the business of building them too. I think you've got 7 under construction. So tell us your view as somebody who's on both sides, developing as well as managing.
Yes, sure, Jean. So we have 7 that we've built. We've got 16 in total in the we're building. So we've got probably another 11 in the pipeline, and probably a few more. And with each build, right from the first one, which was in 2020, it's changed with each iteration, from learnings from the first build to the second build to the third build. And the one that we're building one in Romsey, that's coming up. And that's completely different from the first build that we had. And these changes have come about because of the types of people that are coming in, you know, and their needs. So we're constantly adjusting to the needs of the resident. And as the other speakers have said, you know, the needs of the residents, it's not like when I started in aged care, everyone, they had a standard way of living. They had a standard way of, it was just a standard way of providing care back 30 years ago. Now and because of the aged care, the new aged care standards, plus the new ones that come in, the revised aged care standards, the focus has completely shifted. It's all totally about the individual, which I think is a fantastic thing. So the care needs of the residents are individual, and we have to cater for their needs as they're being admitted. And one of the areas is that of food, which, because there's more and more, you know, people coming in with more different dietary requirements and lifestyle requirements, you know. So that's something that's becoming I think will become an issue, because, you know, we just had a discussion the other day about gluten-free. You know, that used to be a rare thing. Now it's not because of health concerns, it's because it's a lifestyle preference that they have. And we have to cater for those things. And we have to think about those things. And the funding around that also probably needs to change, because, you know, gluten-free and other dietary requirements costs, and it doesn't necessarily fit the funding that we receive for our care. The other aspect is that residents would prefer to see their carers on the floor more. Right, they would like to see a presence on the floor, present at the bedside. Families want to see that presence. And that goes into conflict with the level of compliance that we have to have now. You know, like there's the documentation and all that sort of stuff. So we have to find a solution to that in trying to sort of work with that compliance issue, as well as being there for the resident and caring for them and providing to their care needs. So so that's where our company has invested in new innovations, and the latest one that we're just trialing out now is Care Direct, which allows the staff member to pull them out of that care station, which, you know, typically they go in there at you know, midday and at 3 o'clock to do all of their documentation, and there's no one walking around on the floor because they're so busy doing their documentation, that actually they can do that at the bedside with a mobile device like a phone, which the staff love. They absolutely enjoy using that because they're at the bedside with the resident or in the corridor with the resident. The care stations are completely absent now. There's no one there except for maybe an RN who's doing a bit of documentation. So that's been a game changer for us and for the families and for the resident. Yeah.
It might, I know that's a fairly new thing you've done there, Barry. It might be too early to perhaps have some feedback on staff retention, but do you think staff retention is going to be impacted by the sheer fact that the job will be easier for many of the staff?
Yeah, so early observations, like the staff have basically just absorbed it, like they just love it. That, you know, you just see them in the corridors, yeah, because it's NFC based. So they'll walk into a room and they'll run their mobile device over the NFC, and that'll bring up the resident profile, and they can say, oh, you know, I've showered, or I've assisted with the hygiene, or you know, cleaned up their room and tidied their room for them, or they've had a fall, and they can alert the RN immediately at the bedside. So that the staff, to this point in time, they're totally enjoying it. They're just enthralled with it. I think because we've also catering to their need, because they're used to mobile devices, so they can use it very quick, and we use voice to text as well. So they can write a progress note or whatever. But the point is that they're on the floor, not tethered to the care station. And we're exceeding our documentation, because there's more documentation now, because they're able to capture things as they go along. So it's very good.
And Liam, I mean, you're more on the independent living side, but, you know, what are you seeing when it comes to technology innovation in the home, and perhaps even with your staff, what they're using to do their jobs easier and better?
Yeah, I was just smiling as Barry was talking, because I think you make a beautiful point, Barry, there around effectively what you're talking about is diversity, right? Like, so as populations come online, the diversity of our clientele, our customers, is more and more at the pointy end of what we're doing, and that need for my individual or specific needs to my care or my well-being or my health is what I need. And so we almost have the same challenge or opportunity, but it's inverse as well, because we're going into people's homes to support the stay at home. And so there certainly isn't a one size fits all piece. And the opportunity for us is to think about how technologies can enable our people to engage with our clients in a more human-centered way. So, you know, similar to you know, part of the staying at home is to remain connected face-to-face with people. And so wanting to make sure that the time that our people are in the homes of our clients, they are connected, you know, face-to-face as much as possible, and not talking through tech. And then also maximising their time out in the community as well. So they're not needing to come back to the office to do paperwork or to upload file or case notes. They can do that, you know, in a way that's mobile and is seamless effectively, as well as being compliant and other bits and pieces. So I think from the compliance space, you know, we're still testing technologies in that space in particular, because a lot of the areas that we do service, mobile coverage is really difficult too. Yeah. And so it can be really hard for us to stay fully mobile all the time. It's also about upskilling our people as well, to make sure people are literate when it does come to technologies, because it's not just our, the clients that are challenged by tech, but it's also our people as well, and making sure that the technology is fluent and easy for them to engage with and use. But I think from the client perspective, and when we talk about care, there's a huge movement in technology around assistive technology and falls prevention stuff. So, the sensory technology around the home, as people move through the home, we're able to track and make sure that that they're well and they're mobile and they're safe. And I think the next piece of innovation for us, because innovation is the thing that happens between the problem and the solution, is to make sure that that's not intrusive. That technology is operating in a way where people's privacy is connected, but also that they don't even know that it's happening. It's just there in the background and monitoring what's happening there. And we recently received, in consortium with the University of Sunshine Coast and an organisation called Champion Life here in Southeast Queensland, an ARIA grant to test some of that mobility tech. We're only in the very early stages of that, but we're using a really big sample source here with our client base. And I think there's some really interesting things that are happening in that space, because if we can make sure not only that the interface is seamless with technologies, but the clients don't feel like they're being monitored. If you're at home, you want to still feel like you're at home. I think that's the innovation that can happen in this space. It's going to be really interesting over the coming couple of years, to be honest.
Sean, just on that, in Western Australia, we're actually just about to trial a new radar system that's installed in residents' rooms, which is unintrusive. It's only a sensor in the corner, but it can detect a fall. It can detect if another resident comes into that room. It can detect breathing. So we're able to know on night duty if someone is asleep or the quality of their sleep. So so that's another exciting thing that we're bringing in as well, is this innovation on monitoring residents without being intrusive, and preventing the falls, because we can get there before it actually occurs. And
I think there's, when I say there's some interesting stuff happening in a couple of years, I mean, everybody knows how quick tech moves in this space. But just a couple of years, we were doing some stuff a couple of years ago, and working in communities, stuff goes in and out of vogue all the time, and impact measurement was a big, it goes in and out of trend every now and then. And we were doing some stuff with impact measurement and what, as our people were going out to the homes, quick 10 questions. How are you feeling? How isolated do you feel? And particularly through COVID, how isolated, when's the last time you spoke to a neighbor or a friend or a family member? Have you been outside to walk the dog lately? Watching, and, doing it through the iPads, upload it, and we can get some impact measurements and data there. And we started then talking to the clients after doing a pilot test around that. And the clients, their feedback was, I feel like you want there to be something wrong with me. Like, even though we thought we were doing this reporting, it was like, we're cutting past the sort of the harder data around health and care. And this is about your emotional and spiritual health. They still felt pathologized in that process. So we sort of didn't move past the testing phase with that and moved on. And so it's not even the intrusiveness of the sensory technology or other bits, or big objects around the room watching you and feeling monitored. It's also the way that we as people interface with that technology, and the providers insert that technology or introduce that technology into the spectrum of care. I think that's a really interesting conversation for us to innovate as well as a sector.
I mean, I might just go to Roy just for another comment, because Liam made mention of ARIA, which is just for Roy's benefit and maybe some of our overseas attendees. That's an organisation that's government funded, that is providing grant money to innovative companies, startups, people that have innovative solutions for aged care, and it is reliant upon the solution being trialed and implemented in the context of aged care. So it's not just grants for big ideas; it actually has to be, as Liam said, as part of a trial. Roy, you're very close to the startup scene in Israel, and when we hear, based in Australia, we hear good things. We hear that it's a very innovative, forward-thinking place to be. What are you seeing with respect to the innovation, the ecosystem for startups, perhaps even government support? I mean, somebody's asked that question on the panel. Sorry, on the screen there now. What are you seeing from what is arguably one of the most forward-thinking environments in the world for technology and innovation?
Yeah, well, couple of sectors that they were mentioned by Liam and Barry. We do a lot of monitoring and sensoring based technologies. I think one of the solution that Barry mentioned is by an Israeli company, Vayar, which use like a radar based technology in order to detect falls and in a house environment. There is a lot of going on in the artificial intelligence, the AI. Here in Israel, so we see a lot of AI-based solutions that are now transferring into the aged care and aged tech environment, especially to tackle loneliness and engaging with seniors, not just in the institutions or homes, but also in the aging in place industry. You all probably know that above 90%, especially in Israel, above 90% of the older adults are age in place. So there are a lot of new solutions and offering to and services that are now being directed into the home. Also, we see the use of artificial intelligence, AR and VR, especially in the rehabilitation and fall prevention. We have some very interesting companies and startups that are forming numerous and very interesting training programs for fall prevention. Some of them are approved by the Israeli Ministry of Health and also by the FDA. And especially one of them, the Israeli Gate Better company, is reporting 70% reduction in fall prevention after trainees are doing a series of 10 or 15 sessions with their training programs. There are a lot of solutions also for the connected families, okay, for the caregivers. I think, Barry, you mentioned it before. I think it's not just the standard of service, but it's also the standards of the entire experience, not just for the patients or the resident, but also for their caregivers. They want to be, first of all, they want peace of mind, okay? And for that, there are all kinds of new solutions that are keeping them involved, keeping them on top of things. And I see a lot of systems that are, on one hand, they provide great information for the end user. It means the patient or the resident, also for the staff and management, but also for the caregivers at home. And this is entire ecosystem is now very evolving. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovation coming out of this perception. I don't know how about Australia, but in Israel, 99% of Israeli use WhatsApp application.
Yeah.
So we are all connected via WhatsApp. So the entire communication with the caregivers, by the staff and management of institution is via WhatsApp group. So this is an entire way of thinking, because the response rate, okay, it's much like hospitality, okay. When you, for instance, checking into a hotel, okay, you expect very quick response in service, and that is also transferring into the aged care industry. So it's all technology based, and it's very, very interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your question for you, and this is one of the questions that people, or somebody had actually, or in fact, a couple of people have put this question forward when they registered. I mean, we've spoken about the technology, the innovation being incorporated within, both the home as well as aged care facilities. But you're on the side of things where you're designing these, larger scale facilities. And one of the questions was about dementia care, just how you're incorporating, forward-thinking ideas such as fall prevention and things like that, but certainly also catering for, what is a fairly, massive issue for aged care, which is dementia and the rising incidence of that. I mean, what sort of design are you bringing into the modern day facilities?
So I think maybe, let's say 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, a design brief would land on our desk and it would be, it's a 120 bed room facility or home, and 20 of those beds will be dementia specific. So basically a wing or a neighborhood would be dementia specific, and the others would be a mix of low care or high care, etc. We find now that the brief is it's 120 rooms or 100 rooms, probably a little bit smaller now. But you tell us what you think it should be. Like, should we have a dementia specific, or is it dementia all the way, or elements of it? And we're designing more now so that it is pretty much dementia specific all the way through, whether they are or not, the resident are or not. It's designing for the possibility that they will cognitively decline a little bit more as they stay living there. So the design palettes are pretty similar all the way through, but with technology coming into it, how we think and integrating technology in our design is interesting. So Barry, you mentioned before the technology for staff. So there's more staff on the floor rather than locked away at about 2 o'clock, which is what we used to do as nurses. At 2 o'clock, you grab all your files, you go to the nurse's station, that's it. Don't talk to me for an hour while I do like 50,000 pieces of administration. Then 3 o'clock, handover, and you're out of there, sort of thing. Now we're designing smaller nurses stations to the point where they don't exist anymore. I like to call them care concierges, where really they're just a touchstone point. It's more a connection spot, but really they're working everywhere. And if we talk about flexible approaches, like the spaces are designed for flexible approaches as well. And Barry, when you talked about food and beverage delivery, it's, some people don't want to wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning to have breakfast, or they're probably ready at 4 o'clock or 11 o'clock, or they don't want to have breakfast at all. Like, that flexible approach allows us to design, I think, much better design, and therefore for dementia, it has more of a flexible and intentional approach to it. But I find that we're getting really good with our designing for residents and families, and where we need to really push ourselves is designing for carers. And I think for the last 2 years, with the impacts of the pandemic, where it really highlighted how, and Barry, you'd know this, or you probably see this in Israel as well, because I know it's a global issue, is not only retaining staff, but getting staff, And traditionally we have put staff rooms down in the bottom of the basement or in the coldest part of the building, no outdoor spaces, yet they're supposed to be places that our staff and our carers are meant to go and have respite, have a moment out, have 30 minutes out and then go back on the floor. And it's heavy duty work. So I like to think that we should think about bringing back of house to front of house and having areas that are more carers centric, as much as it is resident centric and family centric. And then hopefully for operators, this incentivizes carers to stay and bring more into the work stuff, because they like to go to work where they're going to work. Not
Yeah.
thinking, well, I love my job, but gosh, have you seen where I have to have my lunch? Like, it's pretty dismal. It'd be nice if they could just sit and eat amongst everyone. And I think that expectation, and with flexible working and all these other buzzwords that are out there in the market now, aged care is no different. And we are trying to capture this every week, because everything changes. Technology has changed a lot in the last decade, and attitudes and people's expectations, whether it's residents or staff or clients or providers, operators, we're keeping up with it as much as we can. I'm not sure if I answered that question, Sean, but it was a lot.
That's fine. I mean, I love that. I love the focus there on carers. I think that is obviously a big part of the solution, is empowering carers to do their jobs better and easier, and the retention and attraction of staff is key to that. Roy, is it a big problem in Israel, attracting and retaining staff for the care industry?
Yeah, that's a big issue, especially when most of our care staff, professional care staff, and workforce are out of the country, and we have countries from the Eastern Europe and also from the Far East, and there's so much regulation, and on that part, I have to say the government offices are not as efficient as I would expect, especially if you look at the forecast and you look at the at the numbers and in the regulations and the entire bureaucracy, red tapes, whatever, doesn't keep up with the needs. So I hope that we are not going to face a workforce crisis as we see in other countries in Europe or in the United States. Technology and innovation cannot replace. I mean, they're helping, they're aiding, and especially for the caregivers, for loved ones that age at home. But for the institutions and care facilities, technology is very helping staff, but it won't replace the human touch, the human, response. And I think it's, and also, by the way, I mentioned, sectors that we see a lot of progress, not just for, monitoring, but also for malpractice or maltreatment. We see all kinds of new technology in this area coming out of, surveillance technology, monitoring, etc. This is like military-based technologies that are now transforming into the private sector. And we have several very interesting Israeli companies that are now operating in this field. I do hope that robotics will help, especially in the in the hard caring business. For instance, for bathing or transforming or moving older people around the facilities. But it will take time, to also to embed and learn how to operate or transform or this technology into the workforce. But it's not going to cover up for the workforce shortage in the short term or in the medium term.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people have asked about a Q&A. We can probably start a Q&A now, and we've kind of been doing a little bit of that already. So if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we can put it straight to the panel. Somebody's asked a question here about the role of government and authorities in developing aged tech and the development of assistive technologies for older adults. What's our view on that? I mean, Liam, you're pretty close to, I suppose, the end user in many respects.
Yeah.
This future technology. Do you think government has a role to sort of play to help embed this within homes and with people?
Oh, yeah, I think absolutely. I think unequivocally, yes, they do. And if for no other reason, it's around funding those ventures. So I think, you know, the best place for innovation to happen is out in the market, you know, with people like Roy and his colleagues who know how to mobilize good ideas and connect with people like us at Comlink Australia who want to, you know, test those ideas with our consumer base, but that funding has to come from somewhere. It's taxpayers funding, so it should go via the government and come back out into the market that way. So I think that's really important, and I think in particular the government has the ability then to work out how that funding is directed. You know, with the data that they have from, you know, hospitals and health hubs across Australia, they should be able to understand how that funding should be directed through grants processes and other bits and pieces. So yeah, unequivocal yes from me, that's for sure.
Mm.
Right. And oh, sorry, Barry.
Yeah, so I think that technology is also forced, so to say, because of the pressure from compliance and from the government.
Yeah,
particularly with the Aged Care Commission. I think providers have got no option but to try to work smarter. And one of the biggest things that I've been interested over the past probably 3 or 4 years is having an integrated system, so that an operator, a provider, from the provider to the manager to the you know the care manager, that they have a system that speaks to the operations of the business. So, you know, quality and safety, HR compliance, you know, the clinical management system, the medication management system, governance, because that's a big player that's coming through right now, and there's more responsibility on the provider to ensure that the home is that they're aware of what's going on in their homes. And they're held to account for that. And the system that we currently use, Accredia, which is in Signature Care, you know, that is customizable. So whenever there's a change in legislation, and there's been a lot of changes in legislation, we're able to quickly adapt to that change, and then become compliant. The other aspect of that is also is openness and transparency to the Commission when they do visit to check to see that the outcomes for the residents are good. So, you know, having a system that is also transparent. We give, you know, the Commission the same log on as what the residential manager has. There's nothing to hide. They love it because they have access to everything. So that's been a game changer for us. That's sort of happened over the last probably 5 years. It's been developed for Signature Care, probably, yeah, say 3 years for Signature Care, but just before then, I use the system there as well. But that's helped us enormously. And yeah.
I think, Sean, too, like, you know, I think age tech and development of age, like it's a really broad church too. And I think we, you know, one of the things we try really hard because of where we are on the spectrum, you know, if you want to call it the care spectrum, for want of a better term, where we are at Comlink Australia on that spectrum is aging is a lifelong journey, right? And so when we're talking about funding age tech, it doesn't necessarily need to be from where you know, meet Comlink Australia all the way to where you end up in one of Barry's spaces. You know, I think we should be thinking about, you know, government should be thinking about, you know, the way they think about planning, you know, developments in new communities and other bits. And so how can people stay in their homes longer? And they're built, those houses are built from the moment that foundations are laid with aging in place in mind, you know, because we're all on that spectrum in some way, shape or form. We all know it's better to stay at home longer. And then when the time is right, and the choice is yours and you go into one of Barry's spaces, but you can keep people healthier if they're in their homes longer. And that's an age tech solution that should be thought about from the very beginning. And the government has a lot of say in that space. You know, solar panels is an easy kind of way to think about those things. So we think about subsidizing solar panels for homes. Why can't we be thinking about age tech as well when buildings or developments are signed off by governments? You know, I think that's something we should be talking about too.
Yeah.
Julia, is that conversation?
I also, sorry. I also think government role in regulation about data It
Yeah.
was mentioned earlier about privacy, okay, but also sharing the data and especially mapping the needs. Okay, we have. I'm doing a very interesting project with one of the biggest cities in Israel that is all about mapping the needs of the entire older adults population. When you have the data, when you can analyze the numbers, you can allocate your resources. You can, do the design and design ahead and allocate your especially if it's public funding. So mapping and data are crucial. And also what Leah mentioned earlier is funding. Of course, we have in Israel the Israeli Innovation Authority, which backs early stage startups with funding and grants and giving them the push to proceed with pilots and advance in the global markets, and then return to Israel with much more mature technologies. And so, and also it's also the about design. It's not just facilities, but it's also the entire how we build communities, how we build new neighborhoods and cities, not just the facilities themselves, how we, allow aging in place for the entire age group, not just seniors, but also for young parents or families and etc.
And Julie, I mean, on the design front, is that conversation now quite established in all aspects of design, not just aged care design? Are you starting to see that across the board?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as designers, there's more responsibility now than ever to not just design what, and Barry, don't hate me for this, but design what the client wants. That we are advisors in the space, and and we don't design for it just simply to look good. It needs to function, and I've always been very strong on that. It just needs to function. It needs to function for staff. It needs to function for resident and family. The whole model, but I think also knowing the data, the statistics, rather than designing by what someone thinks this works, which is sort of a bit like the one size fits all when we all know it fits no one. But designing towards the statistics and the data says this, this is how it is. So we need to run with that a little bit more. It needs to be more of an intellectual process, I think, rather than just simply wallpapers and fabrics and textures. It needs to be more involved, and it is, for the most part it is, but certainly we have seen a shift in expectations from us to be more knowledge-based designers rather than just simply designers.
I've got a question here from, I suspect this is from somebody in Israel, so I might direct this to you, Roy. It's from Gary Sajiv. And the question is, we have a digital platform technology for dementia patients in order to assist them to stay at their home. Does it need a medical regulatory clearance, even if it's a wellness device? I'm not too sure if you can answer that. Are you familiar with this particular person or even this type of technology, which sounds interesting, I've got to say.
Yeah, we have several solutions in Israel. One of them is like a screen that really can manage from that a caregiver can manage a person that is suffering from dementia from afar. Very interesting solution. As I'm not sure about Australia, but I'm pretty sure that in Israel most of the the regulatory or observations and law needs some kind of approval, either by the Ministry of Health or other offices. So especially if you want to work in other countries or in other continents, regulatory specifics and observation is a must. So you have to follow each country's laws.
Yeah, Gary's just updated the question. It's a product called Memo App, and it looks like it's available in Australia. Liam,
Yeah.
have you come across these type of wellness products, in the context of your business and perhaps even any regulation that might be in place with respect to them being used?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that technology in particular, except to say that, Gary and I probably have equal amounts of knowledge and understanding of how the regulation interfaces with the new and emerging technologies. I think we're in a really quickly evolving space at the moment, and the Commission are pushing a lot of onus down to us as providers. That would be an understatement. And the home care space in particular is now starting to be more spoken about, and will continue to be, and again, rightly so, I think. So how technology and the regulator interface and keep us as the sandwich in the middle is awkward, but it's something that we just sort of have to stay in front of, I think. And I think conversations like this are really important. But yeah, I can't speak about that technology in particular, I'm afraid, Sean.
No, that's okay. Maybe as a final question, and this was a question that was actually asked originally when somebody registered. They suggested that aged care providers, are sometimes reluctant to adopt or even trial new technology. I mean, what's your view, maybe Barry? I mean, you've got a fairly big business there. I mean, how open are you to submissions or requests from new businesses that have something for you?
I think in today's climate, you've got no option but to seek new technology, because you've got to keep up with it. And I think there's a lot of providers who are bowing out of aged care because they just can't keep up with the change. And I think the only way that you can is with new technology. I couldn't imagine working in this day and age like on paper. Like, there are providers out there who still use paper, and I do not know how they do that, because it's fast-paced. You need oversight, especially in my role as quality. We've got homes all across Australia, and as soon as we need, someone rocks on the front door, you need to be able to see that home, assess its risk, make whatever changes you need to make, just to make sure that we're compliant with the requests from the Commission. And it's got to be done at lightning speed. I mean, the Commission said just recently in one of their webinars, that they want to see positive responses from the home when something is identified. And that means they must have the capacity to do that. So if they haven't got that capacity, then they're delayed in their response. And then, of course, they basically said it, is that you're penalised because of that if you're not responsive enough, or if you're not taking their recommendations seriously enough, then you have to wear the consequences of that, which impacts the business, basically.
Gary's asked another question here, and I think it's a good question, because it's something I want to bring in to these discussions. He's asked about bringing this technology to Australia, and this is probably something I can share with everybody on the call or on the webinar. If you have a solution that you think's interesting, just reply to the email that I'll send you today with a recording of this session with some details on who you are and what you offer. And we can put that at the bottom of the story, which will also have the recording of today's session. So it's a little way that we can maybe shine a light on some new innovation, and perhaps, whether it's Barry or Liam or maybe some other readers that we have might notice these solutions and might want to make contact. So if you have something that you think's interesting for those in the business of providing care, just reply to my email, and we can maybe put that on the website as a little listing for people to reference. That might be a nice way to finish up, because I've just noticed we're right on 1 hour, and we try not to go over an hour for these. But thanks very much to all of our guests. I really appreciate the time that you've put into this, and hopefully we can have you back in the future sometime.
Thanks. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.